The California sun bounced off the turquoise water of the pool, throwing harsh, moving webs of light across the stone patio. It was 85 degrees, the kind of windless, oppressive heat that usually drove people indoors, but the two women standing in front of me hadn't moved in 20 minutes. I stood with my back to the ocean, the fabric of my gray t-shirt sticking slightly to my shoulder blades. I noticed the discrepancy immediately. The patio was furnished with imported teak loungers and perfectly manicured agave plants, designed for absolute leisure. Yet the heavy, rigid stacks of financial dossiers sitting on the glass table between us turned the space into a war room. Madeline Gardner was closest to me, wearing a ribbed beige top that matched the neutral, uncompromising tones of her posture. At 38, she possessed a sharp, exhausted resilience. Her blonde hair caught the sunlight, but her eyes were locked onto the ledgers, calculating survival. Her half-sister, Bella Castro, stood slightly behind her. Bella wore a dark green top, her arms crossed tight against her chest in a defensive, anxious knot. She looked at me, then at the water, then back at me. "You were hired to advise the majority shareholder, Jackson," Madeline said. Her voice was steady, but I caught the slight, almost imperceptible tightening around her eyes when she looked at the files. "Bella wants to liquidate her shares to the Davis faction. I want to audit the holding company and fight the hostile takeover. We are at a deadlock." I didn't answer right away. I let the silence hang, listening to the gentle lap of the pool water against the tiles. My career obsession usually kept me in air-conditioned high-rises, dissecting corporate fraud until 2 in the morning. I didn't do poolside consultations. But the Gardner Holdings account was different. It was a legacy being ripped apart from the inside. Bella shifted her weight, the shadow of a large white umbrella falling across her face. "The board is going to push us out anyway, Maddie. If I sell now, we walk away with something. If you fight, we lose it all." She turned her gaze entirely to me. "You're the best forensic accountant in the state. Who has the better math? Pick one." I looked down at the files stacked on the glass. The leather binders were thick with 5 years of corporate history. 2 different strategies. 2 sisters being played against each other by a board member who wanted to carve up their father's empire and sell it for parts. I smiled, though there was no humor in it. "Why not both?" Madeline frowned. A genuine crease of confusion broke her composed mask. "Both what?" "Why not represent the entire entity?" I stepped forward. I placed my hand flat on the top of the nearest financial dossier. The leather was warm from the sun. "Bella," I said, keeping my voice level and purely factual, "if you sell to Davis, the capital gains tax and the hidden mezzanine debt trigger in your current structure will eat 60% of your payout. You won't walk away with a safety net. You'll walk away with a tax liability." Bella's arms dropped slowly to her sides. The anxiety in her posture morphed into sudden, sharp alarm. I turned my focus to Madeline. "And Madeline, if you fight blindly without knowing the exact location of the debt traps, they'll bury you in legal fees until you default on the primary loans. You have spirit, but spirit doesn't pay liquid capital calls." "So what is your proposal?" Madeline asked. She didn't flinch at the critique. She just absorbed the data and demanded the next step. "I audit both your portfolios as a unified front," I explained, tapping the dossier once. "I don't just find out what you owe. I find out what the board is hiding from you. I map the traps before Davis can spring them." Madeline didn't move. She just stared at my hand on the files, then up to my face. The tension in the air wasn't electric or charged. It was heavy, like the drop in barometric pressure before a massive storm. "If you do this," Madeline said quietly, her voice dropping an octave, "and you fail, Richard Davis will ensure your firm is blacklisted in this state. He sits on 3 banking oversight committees. I don't fail on the math, I said, and I don't work for Richard Davis. She studied my face for 3 long seconds. She was looking for ego or a bluff. I gave her neither. I just gave her absolute, boring certainty. Fine, Madeline said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a heavy brass keycard. You have 6 weeks until the quarterly board vote. The war room is yours. Over the next 4 days, my entire life condensed into the glass-walled conference room at the Gardner headquarters. The building overlooked the Pacific, but I kept the automated blinds drawn. The sunlight glaring off the water made it harder to read the tiny 8-point font on the Schedule C disclosures. The AC hummed a constant, monotonous drone that served as my only soundtrack. I lived on lukewarm black coffee and the harsh blue glare of my laptop screen. I was tracking the money. The hostile force wasn't a mystery. Richard Davis was a senior board member with a slick, practiced smile and a predatory investment firm backing his every move. He had been systematically acquiring Gardner Holdings debt for 2 years through secondary markets. On Thursday night, the sun finally dipped below the ocean horizon. The office turned into a dark cave, lit only by my desk lamp and the glow of my monitors. The door clicked open and Madeline walked in. She was carrying a thick, 4-inch legal binder. She dropped it onto the table. It landed with a heavy, dull thud that echoed in the quiet room. That's the last of the vendor contracts, she said. She sank into the chair opposite mine. She rubbed her left temple with 2 fingers, a habit I had already cataloged. The sheer exhaustion rolling off her was a physical weight in the room. I kept my eyes on the spreadsheet, tracking a series of amortized leverage ratios. He's using cross-collateralized shell LLCs, I said, my voice quiet in the empty office. Madeline stopped rubbing her temple. Explain it to me in plain English. Davis didn't just buy your debt, I said, highlighting a block of cells in yellow. He structured it so that if Gardner Holdings misses 1 quarterly revenue target, the default triggers a total asset surrender. It's a clean, perfectly legal snare. He isn't trying to buy you out. He is trying to force a forfeiture. Can we restructure the terms? Not with him holding the paper. I closed my laptop. The sudden click of the lid was the loudest sound in the room. Have you eaten today, Madeline? She looked at me, her hand dropping to the table. I don't have time to eat, Jackson. If I stop moving, he takes my father's company. If you don't eat, you collapse, I countered, my tone flat. And unconscious CEOs don't win proxy fights. I stood up. I walked to the mini-fridge in the corner of the room, pulled out a high-protein meal replacement shake I had bought earlier, and walked back. I set it on the table directly in front of her. I didn't ask her what she wanted. I didn't offer to buy her a lavish dinner. Drink it, I said. Then go home. I'll finish the vendor review. There are 500 pages in that binder, she protested, gesturing to the massive stack of paper. You've been here for 14 hours. I read fast. I reached across the table and physically pulled the heavy binder toward my side of the desk. I took the uncomfortable task away from her so she could rest. Go. That's a directive from your auditor. She looked at the plastic bottle, then up at me. For a second, her formidable corporate armor cracked. A profound, quiet relief washed over her features. It wasn't romantic heat. It was the sudden, shocking stillness of not having to carry the sky completely alone for one night. Thank you, she said softly. She unscrewed the cap of the shake. By the second week, the pressure from Davis escalated from passive aggression to direct action. He called a sudden financial committee meeting, citing fiduciary concerns to force an early vote on Bella's shares. I sat next to Madeline at the long, polished mahogany table in the main boardroom. Davis sat at the head. He had a smug, relaxed posture that immediately irritated my teeth. Bella sat across from us, looking pale and cornered. The numbers are clear, Madeline, Davis said. He slid a single sheet of paper across the wood. "We have the votes to force the sale of the coastal properties. Bella is on board. The liquidation begins Monday. It's over." Madeline's hands were hidden under the table. I couldn't see them, but I could see the rigid, tense line of her shoulders. She was preparing to defend herself, to argue with a man who held all the cards. I didn't let her. I reached out and grabbed Davis's sheet of paper before it reached Madeline. I held it up, my eyes scanning the clauses. My brain cataloged the legal traps in seconds. It took me exactly 12 seconds to find the flaw. "This is a violation of Article 4, Section B of the Founding Charter," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It was crisp, level, and cut through the room like a scalpel. I tossed the paper back toward Davis. It slid and stopped perfectly in front of his coffee mug. Davis frowned. "Mr. Hart, this is an internal board matter. You are a guest." "I am the auditor of record for the majority shares," I replied. "And you cannot force a property sale while a comprehensive financial audit is ongoing. The audit is ongoing until I file the completion forms." Davis's smile tightened into a grimace. "That is a stalling tactic. The charter clause requires a material discrepancy to maintain an audit freeze." "I have 14 material discrepancies," I said. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a stack of printouts. 14 discrepancies in your shell company acquisitions, specifically violating the conflict of interest bylaws. We can review them in this room, or I can file them with the SEC tomorrow morning. The room went dead silent. The other 4 board members shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. Davis stared at me, his eyes narrowing as he calculated the risk. "Meeting adjourned," Davis snapped. He stood up abruptly and walked out. When the room finally cleared, leaving only me and Madeline, she let out a long, shaky exhale. I didn't look at her immediately. I organized my files, clipping them together with precise movements. I gave her the dignity of recovering her composure without an audience. "You didn't have to put your own firm's neck on the line," she finally said. The strain in her voice was still evident. "I didn't," I said, sliding the files back into my briefcase. "I just read the rules faster than he did. The math doesn't care about his ego." I looked at her then. The afternoon light caught the faint, bruised-looking shadows under her eyes. I wanted, suddenly and intensely, to reach out and smooth the tension from her forehead. The urge was a physical pull. I kept my hands firmly gripped on the leather handle of my briefcase. The tension was a liability. I needed to be a strategist for her, not a distraction. "Go back to your office," I told her. "I have more files to read." The midpoint shifted the ground out from under us on a Tuesday afternoon. The coastal weather had broken. Rain was beating violently against the office windows, distorting the city lights into blurred, running streaks of yellow and red. I was running a final stress test on the debt structure when my phone vibrated on the desk. It was an automated alert from the county clerk's office. I clicked the file open. My stomach dropped completely. Madeline walked into the room 10 seconds later. She was shaking a wet umbrella, her coat damp from the brief walk from her car. "Traffic is an absolute nightmare," she said, tossing her keys on the table. "What did you find?" "Davis didn't wait for the vote," I said. I turned the laptop screen so she could see the glowing red text. He bypassed the board entirely. Madeline stopped halfway across the room. "What do you mean?" "He triggered the mezzanine debt clause through a third-party bank by claiming a technical default on a secondary covenant," I explained. My voice was flat. I was fighting to keep the anger out of it. "They just called the loan. $30 million. Due in 48 hours. The umbrella slipped from her fingers. It clattered loudly against the hardwood floor. She walked slowly to the window, pressing her palm against the cold glass. The silence in the room was suffocating. The noise of the rain outside seemed to amplify the ruin inside. "My father built this company from a single storefront," she whispered. Her voice broke. It was a tiny, fractured sound that sounded completely wrong coming from her. I walked over to her. I didn't offer a motivational speech. I didn't tell her it was going to be okay, because right now, the spreadsheet said it wasn't. I stood beside her, exactly a foot away, close enough to block the chill radiating from the window, far enough to respect the boundary. She turned her head, looking at my reflection in the dark glass. Then she reached out and gripped my forearm. Her fingers dug fiercely into the fabric of my suit jacket. She was shaking. I didn't move. I didn't pull her into a hug. I didn't try to stroke her hair. I just stood perfectly still, letting my arm be the solid, unmoving thing she needed to hold on to. The physical contact wasn't about heat. It was a transfer of stability. I focused on slowing my own breathing, maintaining a steady, calm rhythm. I let that calm pass into her grip. Slowly, the tremor in her hand stopped. The world stopped spinning. "I'll step down," she said. Her voice was hollow, stripped of its usual command. "If I resign my shares and hand control to Bella, Davis will drop the debt call. Bella gets her payout, the company gets absorbed, but you get out clean. I won't let him ruin your firm's reputation over a lost cause." "No." She looked up at me. She was surprised by the absolute finality in my voice. "You aren't stepping down," I said. I pulled my phone out of my pocket with my free hand. "I'm going to map a path out of this. You are going to go home, pack an overnight bag, and drive to Bella's house. You are going to explain exactly what Davis is doing to both of your inheritances. You handle your sister. I will handle the bank." "Jackson, it's $30 million. "I know exactly what the number is," I said. I gently stepped back, breaking the physical contact so I could look her directly in the eye. "Let me do my job, Madeline." She didn't argue. She nodded once, picked up her umbrella, and left to fight her half of the war. The next 48 hours were a blur of aggressive legal filings, encrypted phone calls, and ruthless accounting. Davis thought he had cornered a fractured family business. He didn't realize he was fighting an urban strategist who knew how to weaponize a balance sheet. I didn't sleep. I drank coffee until my hands shook, then I switched to water and kept typing. I initiated a sequence of wire transfers, legal lockboxes, and holding company registrations. I was building a machine specifically designed to crush Richard Davis. By Thursday morning, the main boardroom felt like an execution chamber. The rain had stopped, leaving a harsh, bright glare coming through the windows. Davis was already sitting at the table. He had a thick stack of transfer documents resting neatly in front of him. Bella sat on the far side of the room. She looked exhausted, but her posture was different. She wasn't shrinking anymore. Madeline walked into the room beside me. She wore a tailored charcoal suit that looked like armor. "Time is up, Madeline," Davis said. He tapped his expensive fountain pen against the wood. "Sign the asset transfer. Bella has already seen the writing on the wall." Bella looked down at her hands, but she didn't apologize this time. Madeline didn't flinch. She sat down smoothly, folding her hands on top of the table. She didn't look at Davis. She looked at me. It was a clear, public surrender of control to my strategy, a complete, unhesitating trust. I opened my briefcase. I pulled out a single thin manila folder. I didn't sit down. "You called the $30 million debt through Pacific Standard Bank, Mr. Davis," I said. I walked slowly around the edge of the table. "Standard procedure for a default," he replied smoothly. "Yes, it is." I stopped next to him and dropped the folder directly onto his pristine stack of transfer documents. Which is why, yesterday at 3 p.m., I initiated a leveraged buyout of Pacific Standard's distressed commercial debt portfolio on behalf of a new, private holding group. Davis stopped tapping his pen, His eyes darted down to the folder. Gardner Holdings doesn't owe the bank anymore, I stated. My voice echoed slightly in the quiet room. They owe the private holding group. And the holding group has officially decided to restructure the debt over a 30-year term at 0% interest. Davis's face drained of color. The smug mask shattered. What private holding group? You can't just buy a debt portfolio in a day without massive liquid capital. The compliance checks alone take weeks. I can, I said, if the capital comes directly from Bella Castro's trust fund, leveraged against Madeline Gardner's personal real estate assets, utilizing an expedited inter-entity transfer. I looked across the table at Bella. She sat up straighter. A hard, new light shone in her eyes. She had negotiated her own deal, combining her power with her sister's. You pooled their assets, Davis hissed. He fully realized the trap he was standing in. I unified the entity, I corrected him. They don't owe you anything, Davis. The debt call is nullified. Your leverage is gone. The contract you're holding is scrap paper. I looked at Madeline. She was watching me. Her eyes were bright and her posture was relaxed for the first time in 6 weeks. The threat was entirely dismantled. It wasn't a trick. It was measurable, concrete reality. Davis stood up. His heavy leather chair scraped violently against the hardwood floor. He didn't say a single word as he grabbed his briefcase and stormed out of the room. The door slammed shut behind him. The silence he left behind was entirely different from the heavy, suffocating silence of the rainstorm 2 nights ago. This silence felt like breathing. An hour later, Bella left the building to coordinate the new trust documents with the legal team. Madeline and I were left alone in the boardroom. The morning sun was pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows, warming the long mahogany table. I was standing at the side table, packing up my laptop. My hands were methodical, winding cables, organizing files into perfectly aligned stacks. The job was done. The contract was fulfilled. The company was safe. So, Madeline said. She was standing near the window, watching the city traffic below. The audit is officially finished. The audit is finished, I confirmed. I snapped the brass locks of my briefcase shut. Which means, you don't work for me anymore. I stopped moving. I looked at her back, at the way the sunlight caught the blonde strands of her hair. The protective restraint I had maintained for 6 weeks, the strict professional distance, the careful boundaries, suddenly felt entirely unnecessary. It felt like an outdated rule book. No, I said quietly. I don't. She turned around. She walked slowly back to the table, stopping right in front of me. She reached into the pocket of her charcoal jacket and pulled out a heavy brass key. It was the master key to the Gardner Holdings executive suite. She placed it precisely on top of my closed briefcase. I need a permanent chief financial officer, she said. Her voice wasn't corporate anymore. It was soft, hesitant, and entirely open. And I need a partner, not just for the board. I looked down at the key. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture. It wasn't a poem. It was a practical plan. It was a shared schedule, a shared burden, a shared future, locked into a piece of brass. I didn't answer with a speech. I picked up the key, sliding the cool metal into my pocket. Then I closed the short distance between us. I framed her face with both of my hands. I felt the slight tremor in her breath, the sudden sharp intake of air as the professional boundary finally vanished. I kissed her. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't a hungry exploration or a messy collision. It was an arrival. It felt exactly like dropping a massive iron anchor into perfectly calm water. The wandering was over. The fighting was done. The quiet room around us was perfectly still, and for the first time in my adult life, I knew exactly where I belonged. Integrity isn't just about following rules. It's about choosing the harder, honest path to build a foundation that cannot be broken. Real love requires that same unyielding truth. Please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this.